Well, good afternoon. This is Talk Tea with Thee, and today I have a very special guest. I say that for every guest, but you are actually very special. This is Craig Perry, who is most known for producing all six of the Final Destination movies. This is like a never-ending. It's never going to be Final Destination. Is the last one?
It
Just
won't die. Despite the thesis of the movie, it won't die.
the last one just gonna be called The Destination, and then you're
You
out.
know, arrived. It's called arrived.
I mean, who knew? We are just trying to, before I started recording, we were saying how long we've known each other. It's been decades, actually. But we were saying about that's how Hollywood is. Hollywood to me is high school, right? So like
Mhm.
we went to high school together, basically, like a really intense high school that you got paid for, but not very much.
Yeah, it's like high school with a lot of money at stake.
High school with money and drugs, although I guess people did do drugs in high school, but not me. Drinking, drugs, none of that stuff in high school.
When I was a senior in high school, I heard that the freshmen were having cocaine hot tub parties. I'm like, am I like in the 80s? Oh wait, I am in the 80s. That's true. So yeah.
I didn't even have a wine cooler in high school. Nothing. You couldn't have paid me money. I had no interest. I actually heard about alcohol and drug parties too, and I was like, didn't believe it until way later in life. So Hollywood is that. So take all those kids from high school that did drugs, bring them to Hollywood, give them money, expense accounts, access to
And
celebrity.
a deep psychic wound that's trying to be healed. And there you have the Hollywood landscape.
I think I'm fascinated by our time in Hollywood. So this is the 90s where there was just a lot of money floating around that at that time, right? I mean, production company wise.
Well, well, first off, hey, hi, nice to meet you. Hi, I'm Craig Perry. Everybody out there, you can get to know my voice, not just disembodied and visual. Um, well, the thing that's interesting is people forget that home video and DVDs in particular were a massive, massive profit center in the late 80s and the 90s up to the early 2000s. So you could make a movie, and if it didn't do well at the box office, that's fine because you could release it on DVD where you sell it for 19.99. It costs $4 to make, and the studios and people were like, oh, for the price of a ticket, I can just buy a DVD, as opposed to like having six people go out and spend the money. Yeah, I'll do that. They were making money hand over fist. It was like theatrical was a loss leader for home video at that point. So there was billions and billions of dollars being tossed in, which is why you saw so many movies getting made. Why Disney had Hollywood Pictures and Touchstone Pictures. They had these labels underneath that each were generating between 30 and 40 movies a year. So they were fueling that beast. So yes, you're right. There was tons of money and lots of opportunity. There's a lot of ways that people could quote unquote make it. And they were so desperate to feed that beast that you were talking about production companies. They all had overhead deals at every studio because they needed somebody who would just throw ideas at them and generate volumes of content that we just don't see these days. And even when Netflix was doing its spasm of like production in the last 6 years, that's now tapered off. Didn't even begin to get close to what they were doing in the studio system back in the early 90s and the
So
2000s.
you don't liken it to streaming because you could get rich off, and your criteria for those movies was a lot, the threshold was a lot lower. I mean, you just needed a name. It didn't matter really what it was about because you just wanted someone to spend that 1999, and then after that, it didn't really.
Yes and no. Look, the studio still wanted the movies to be as good as they could be, but when you're
Right.
on that kind of an accelerated production schedule to
It's
get
not
things
going to be
out, you're just never going to have the luxury of time. Is one of the
right.
three pillars of necessity for making any kind of a project. And when that's been curtailed, that's the thing that suffers is quality, or it just gets a little rough around the edges. But one of those movies, I mean, this is the movies back then also had such usually a great idea at their core. And they would cast it up or cast around it, but it was just a really simple premise that people could get their head around. And I think we certainly do that to these days, but now it's all based on the movies that were made back in the 90s. The IP
I
that we
know people.
generated in the 80s and 90s is the stuff they're still making today.
It drives people crazy. Why can't Hollywood come up with new ideas? Well, because it's a business and those ideas are bankable still. Remember Bob Cosberg, the idea man? I was obsessed with.
Absolutely.
You'd pay $500 for your one little one line log line for a movie on an index card. He wouldn't have these like big, huge conferences and you show up with your little idea and he would pay you. It would be like, I remember when it was like, the movie's called Prince Charming. So it's Cinderella, but it's from the point of view of Prince Charming. That's it. That's all you have. He gives you $500 as long as he can see the poster. He always said, if I could see the poster, then I'll give you the money. And this is like the great, I mean, I remember 12 Monkeys. It was a Bob Cosberg original idea.
Mhm.
So it was great. And you're right. It was just more of a factory. But for us, for middle, so I did development in Hollywood. I was an assistant back when Craig was a producer, produced American Pie. At this time, I wrote a column for his website, which sounds dumb at this point because everyone does it. But back then, they weren't doing that. You weren't producing content on websites. It was so new.
I give Warren great credit for sort of being at the vanguard of having people like you to sort of create content so that would drive people to go to the site, which the function of the site was to have people submit log lines in
Which
a
is great,
way.
which is amazing because thinking about what your site did, exactly, it was a screenwriter website where you could go in and submit your screenplay or your idea, and you would have real professionals in Hollywood reading your
Well,
stuff, which you don't even
here's what's
have that now.
interesting. The log line had to be under 140 characters. Do you know why? Because copyright law does not apply to anything under 140 characters.
So you couldn't be sued for taking it?
Correct. So, well, not taking it. So you weren't worried about seeing a volume of ideas, much like the Cosberg Pitch Fest. So you could say, okay, is there a movie here? And the up or down vote was based on that very concrete and simple and short log line. And if we liked it, then they would sign a release and we'd do 20 pages. And then if we like that, we would
Right.
sign another release and then we do like 45 and then you do the whole thing. So you're not inundated with like 1,000 scripts. You start with, do we feel like at first blush if this is or is not a movie? If yes, then you go here. Now, what sometimes happened is it sounded like a movie and then it didn't quite turn out the way you'd want,
No.
but you found a good writer and somebody who was actually like, ideas are the hard part. And I wouldn't say that good writing is easy, but there's a lot more good writers than there are great ideas for movies. So
Right.
that was a really interesting thing to sort of watch happen in real time on the website is you see, yeah, there's a shit ton of ideas, but they're not all great. But there are better writers out there. There are people who have learned how to communicate. And what I discovered is a lot of them were autistic. A lot of them, they literally were the kids growing up on the CompuServes, and like there's having chat rooms, and that's how their identity was. And those people who were on the spectrum were so smart and so creative, but had such challenges communicating with people. They wound up going to our website and demonstrating that skill as a writer. And we were able to take some of those people and their voices. And I have one guy I still know. He's multi-published novelist, has a bunch of movies made. Can't sit in a room with you to save your life, but one of the smartest people I've ever met. And once you start chatting with him or DMing with him, it's wonderful because everything that comes out of his mouth is so considered and thoughtful. But he just couldn't do it. So the internet has done a lot of terrible, awful things. It has shined a hot light on the worst capacities of humanity, but it's also given some people safety to be themselves in a way that they would never imagine. And I think that, that's one of the things that I walked away from that going, wow, there's a lot of people out there who are much smarter than anyone gives them credit for. We should start giving them credit.
Right. I love that. And it was access really was one of the main things too back then, because what was your access? You could send a hard copy query letter to an agent or a producer saying, hi, this is my idea. And maybe it would get open, maybe it wouldn't. And this was it. You didn't have any other way to get hold of these people, get your ideas in. So it was like all of a sudden Inside came along and then I wrote my little smutty column about some like really trashy girl that worked in Hollywood because a lot of these guys were super nerdy, right? Like they hadn't seen and been on a date with a girl. They've been on their computer since computers were invented. And I came along and I just was as trashy as I could be. And these guys loved it. And they would come on your page for my.
Well, I would like to say to your fine listeners, trashy is a very sort of specific term. I would say that you were truthful. You basically were able to be very honest with people about all manner of things. And that was so bracing and audacious for so many people that they took great pleasure in you calling it out as it should be called out. And I think you're continuing to do it to this day. So good for you, man.
Well, it's funny because Jenny Frankel, who was my best friend at the time, who was Warren's eyes assistant, is who brought me in. And we had exchanged scripts. We were in the same script tracking group. So we did developments. We were on the junior level and we were trying to find projects for our bosses. So you read scripts all day, try to find good scripts and track what scripts agents are bringing out across town. And that's how I met Jenny. And she said, you're so funny when you come to like our little development parties and assistant parties and tell your stories. You should write something for our page. And I seriously had never in my life written anything I got my master's degree and wrote critical essays. Like that was my thing. I was like, I don't write fiction or like whatever you're talking about. We didn't even know the word blogging back then. I was like, I don't know. She's like, just tell your stories, but like write them down. And that's how D-Girl started. And I honestly look back now and the writing was so atrocious, but kind of like the worse my writing was, the better the story was, because really I didn't know
Because
what
it felt like something that you wrote on the bedside table on a scrap of paper. It felt like, before I forget, I better memorialize this.
which I did, by the way, which I did. I had terrible writing habits. I used to wake up because your hours as a development girl were like, 8 to midnight. Like you're at breakfast, you're at drinks, you're at lunch, you're at dinners, you're at parties to try to meet all the people in Hollywood to get this material for your bosses. So I did write them at like 7 a.m., like, driving in my car with like one hand on the
When you're feeling your absolute best is when you're writing this stuff.
so then you
But
guys
wouldn't it
were
be
doing
great if voice to text were prevalent then? So much more could get done because you're just copy editing. You're not actually generating. You're driving. You could drive and actually download everything. You could do it that night.
I remember I had in D-Girl, I wrote a thing was it was going to be scripts on tape because I was so tired of carrying my bag around, my canvas bag full of scripts. And I was like, let somebody pay somebody to read them on a tape recorder and then put the cassette into our car when we're driving, and development people will like save so much because we're all in traffic in LA. I thought that was so revolutionary. Now, of course, like podcasts and
But I don't know about you, but all of my podcasts are at 2 times speed, so it's like having the chipmunks yell at me all day long.
no, 100%. And that's how I speak in real life, actually. But so then you guys were doing American Pie when I first met you guys, which obviously
Mhm.
was huge. You guys brought me to the premiere, invited me to the premiere. It was super fun. And then your company, Sheila was your brainiac. She was the notes
Mhm.
genius there, which I completely related to Sheila. I loved how she would crack a script because that was my favorite part of Hollywood. And after I left Hollywood, that's all I did for years. People send me scripts. Warren and I have kept in touch up until this day because I would help him. Like, you send me your script and I'll crack it for you, literally from home, because that was my favorite part of Hollywood. I loved like figuring out a great note on a script. But my forte was my social game, right? Because I knew everyone. And that's how I got all my jobs. But really, my favorite part was not any of that. It was my Sheila part. I loved it when Sheila would get her little genius. So you guys are still working together. She's on final.
Absolutely. We are. She's the work wife, and now gosh, it'll be 30 years in 1998. I mean, so it was 1998 when we first started working together. So in 2028, it'll be 30 years that we've been working together,
Wow,
which is an
that's amazing that you kept that together, Craig. Good for you. They're not a
well,
lot.
when it works, you don't fight it, and we complement each other's skill sets, I think, in very positive ways, and I like having a female perspective in the conversation. It really helps, I think, balance out what is the Hollywood sausage fest. I
Right.
think that
That's
makes a very important contribution to making sure that whatever you're working on is balanced in perspective and is authentic. Um, and she's funny. So, I like having funny people around me. So there you go.
so now you guys obviously cranking out the Final Destinations, and then this one. What were your expectations? Because there's no way that reality has your expectations were what has occurred with this movie.
No, no. Look, Final Destination 4, I could eat a can of film and shit a better movie. It was terrible, but it was the most successful financially because it was riding the sort of 3D wave. It was just starting to
Right.
crest and go to shore. So it gave us an opportunity to make FD5 because of the financial success of 4, which allowed to me, I mean, for me, I was like, oh my God, creative redemption. We got to fix what we broke. We got to
Right.
fix it. And I think we did. I'm very proud of and happy with how Final Destination 5 turned out. I think we were able to course correct quite significantly, but because we burned the audience in 4, it was not as financially successful 5.
Right. You had to earn those people back.
Yeah. So the people were like, okay, we're a New Line. They were like, let's just, we've been doing it every 3 years, and now this last one was a 2 year between, films. Let's just sit down for a little bit. Understood. But it was in 2017 when they were like, you know what? This thing Max is forming. Like, we should probably think about maybe servicing that. This is like actual IP that is not Superman, but still is IP, and it would be very helpful. So let's try, let's bring the band back together. So we started to look at it only about 5 or 6 years after the release of FD5, But
Right.
then, getting a draft, particularly these movies are very technically and logistically challenging to come up with all of these Rube Goldberg set pieces and have them actually make just enough plausible, incredible sense that the audience doesn't throw the bullshit card down.
It
That
is a balancing act. It's a fine art to what you guys do with those
total and like the tones, we have to have it be that people are dying, people are mourning, but they're not mourning so long that it becomes sad and not fun.
right.
We have to have a plot that is absurd, and people have to be able to credibly express the plot and what's happening with exposition, and not make the audience go, "That sounds ridiculous," even though it is ridiculous. And then we have to have it be actually funny, but not funny by poking fun and being meta. It has to actually have the characters have a sense of humor that they're commenting on it.
Right.
All of these tonal plates are really hard to balance out. Um, so getting that draft where it was, it took 2 years, and then we couldn't quite fix the third landing, and then we had a regime change at the studio, which then pushes time because every project just drifts off into the wilderness. And then we got the go ahead to reboot it again and try and figure out how to get this thing done. Awesome. John Watts, who directed the last three Spider-Man movies and Wolves with Clooney and Pitt, as well as Cop Car with the inevitable Kevin Bacon. He's fantastic, and he loves the franchise, and he came to us with the sort of concept, wrote the treatment, so he came aboard as a producer with us, and we got a bunch of writers to sort of figure out what that story would be. Great. Hired the writers that were going to execute, started up, and then COVID. And so that lost
Right.
another two and
Right.
a half years of getting it made, basically. And then we did finally get it off the ground, and we're up there in Vancouver. We had 14 weeks of prep, and then the actor strike. So that
Oh
pushes out
God.
another nine
This is
months.
like Final Destination real. We
The
need a
Final Destination
documentary.
development style.
We need a
So
behind the scenes.
yeah, so the 14-year absence is a bit of a misnomer. It was really only about 6 years
Right.
before we started talking about generating another one. But this is what happens in Hollywood. Like these movies and any movie takes a long time. That's not a just add water proposition. So getting this movie where it needed, and I think oddly enough, we benefited from the time. And why do you think that was? What do you think? What happened in those 14 years? What surged in those 14 years in a way that nobody would have anticipated?
In the last 14 years.
Social media.
Right.
Final Destination became a hashtag. Someone goes behind a logging truck and they happen to have not only the sum total of human knowledge, but they have a phone and a film camera in their pocket so they can create their own content that is a close call, a misdirect, something that feels moment of deja vu becomes hashtag Final Destination, or oh my God, this is Final Destination, hell no. So we became part of the cultural lexicon without having
Right.
a product in the marketplace.
You
So
got you guys were a meme for a
yeah, we
long, long
we
time.
memed. I still
But
get
this is
truck memes
but
all the
this is
time.
by design at this point. I mean, at this
No,
no,
no.
nothing.
This is just
Wow. You didn't
organic.
push it at all.
We did because the studio wasn't pushing anything for 6 years.
Right. So what's the
So
point?
it was 100% organic. Now, I
That's
would also argue we benefited not just from that, but then streaming did actually become more prevalent, which meant the content was more available. You didn't have to go to a video store. You
right.
didn't have
To
to
go
go
see
pay
it.
VOD. You could just, oh yeah, it's on Max, and there it is. So people were like, what is this Final Destination? They could easily find any of the movies to watch, which again built out where it was. Now, we also had 25 years. So this movie, even though it's a bit more siloed and narrow, it became four quadrants within that narrow margin because you have 17-year-olds who are aware of it and maybe saw it on streaming, but this will be their first time to see it in a theater. You
Right.
have people our age who are like, I remember those movies. They were so much fun. There's going to be one of the great. I can't wait to take my kid to see it. So
Right.
nobody anticipated that these things were going to happen. We just started to realize with the market research that there was something happening, that people were anticipating it. And I would give all credit to the Warner Brothers marketing campaign, which
They killed it.
killed it. Oh
Yes.
my God.
To have that behind you must be just, but by the way, Craig, they already at this point know your final product and knew that it was quality. And so they
Oh,
put that marketing team behind it. Had you produced some crappy Final Destination 6 thing, you would not have had that team behind you,
that,
not that money.
that
So
is
it
true.
all kind of had to come together.
The movie did work.
Right.
And they were happy and had fun with the movie. That was one of the things that we had our sort of about a month ago. We had our big global marketing meeting and publicity strategy meeting. And the powers that be were like, look, Superman, we have to be respectful of. It's Superman. But
Right.
we don't have to be respectable of Final Fantasy. We can have fun with this one. We can push boundaries. We can be provocative. And they were having the time of their lives coming
No,
up with
listen.
crazy off the wall stunts that garnered attention. And
Right.
their digital team was so good at they had they had the Final Destination Bloodlines movie account on TikTok. And if you posted something, Death itself would sometimes respond to your post. So there were
Wow.
people getting into like there was somebody who had to play Death online and
Amazing.
interact with fans. It was so funny because people would be like, "Why is Death following me? I don't like this at all. This is terrible." So
And this is what we're on this because this is what's happened with COVID and then also in social media is everyone's looking for a communal thing. We're all looking for that thing that we're all talking about, we're
yes.
all doing. And there's a certain, your audience. These people are looking for that connection more than anyone. So it was just all these things
Well,
coming together.
all of these things we could never duplicate it. And on a more sort of somber note, the fact that Tony Todd passed away before we released, but he was able to shoot his scene, lent an elevated level of poignancy, I think, to the
Right.
proceedings that it wouldn't have had otherwise. So this was really a perfect storm. We just
Right.
crossed 100 million domestic yesterday.
Wow.
We
I didn't
crossed
even know that.
200. We crossed 100 million internationally the day before, so we're at like 205 million now after 2 weeks. And that's okay. For context, we opened at 51 million and change.
Right.
That our opening weekend outgrossed the entire domestic run of four of the five previous movies. It's insane.
Oh my gosh. That's
So
amazing.
yeah. So look, I don't think we'll ever be able to capture this kind of lightning in a
You will.
bottle.
I'm telling you. It's a this is a cult. This is a cult thing now. They're in the cult. You've got
But
them. You
but
could
the
do
onus
five
on
more of these.
but the are you kidding me? IP never dies. It
Successful.
might IP never dies. It might rest for a little while, maybe 14 years even, but it always comes back because now this is a thing, and I'm sure you've heard this. We made this little movie for Universal in 2018 called Breaking In with Gabrielle Union.
Right.
Long story short, it wound up being a tier one $6 million movie. We didn't take a fee for it because we wanted like a version of the Blumhouse deal. We got a bigger percentage of first dollar gross down the road so we could keep the upfront costs down. We bet
Right.
on ourselves. And the movie made $54 million worldwide on a $6 million budget. You'd think, oh my God, that's a
So much money,
massive
but
hit. Lost money in its
wow.
release. Why do you think that was?
What his salary?
Nope.
No.
Nope. Everybody took a haircut and bet on themselves. It cost about $35 million to market a wide release in North America domestically.
Wow.
And that's not being profligate or any kind of sort of marketing malfeasance.
That
That's
is
just the
very
cost of doing business.
wow.
Because think about this, you people at home. Eh, While you're listening to us, there's 1,000 things that are sort of clawing at you, trying to get your attention so that your entertainment time and dollar is spent elsewhere.
Right.
So, in order from books, magazines, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, the regular internet, movies, sporting events, going out with your friends, even, oh my God, God forbid we actually have human interaction. All of these things demand your time and money. So, in order for you or our movie to be even, for people to even be aware that it exists, you have to make a lot of noise. And what does noise cost? A lot of money. So you can make a $30 million movie, still gonna be $35 million. A $6 million movie, still gonna be $35 million. That's a basic cost for a healthy domestic marketing campaign.
So if you guys want to know why we keep remaking tried and true premises,
Exactly, because there's a feeling that people already are aware of it. When you have an original piece, you're starting from like a zygote phase. Nobody even knows you exist. So you have to, that's a very steep climb. That's a steep climb. So IP will live forever simply because it defrays the marketing costs, upfront marketing costs. And why the window is shortening, because if you spend that much money marketing a movie, well, it's going to be out on premium VOD or streaming VOD within 6 to 8 weeks
so
because
quickly.
there's
Right.
still marketing messages echoing in the ecosystem so that you're not this starting fresh 18 months later when you had because remember how like you would have to release a DVD or a home video movie. It was 6 months to 9 months later. You have a whole new campaign. You have to start
Right.
all over again because a lot of stuff's happened. So all you people are getting a first-hand look at why movies are both hard to make and why they cost so much and why it's terrifying to make something original because you have to penetrate the din.
You do, but on the other side of that, going viral and the access to so many millions of people that are was not available back in the day when you had to stand in front of a movie theater with a billboard or whatever it was to get people to know about your movie. Now, if you can somehow figure out that formula, which as we all know is changes every day, and get that attention, then you get something that goes viral, and then all of a sudden you do have millions of eyes on it. So you just have to just play that game now, Craig. It's a different game, but it's getting more
it is.
profitable.
But as you pointed out, going viral is there are no blazed trail. Nobody, I
No,
think, can
of course.
define why or when things go viral. So we actually, part of the casting consideration now is what their social media footprint is. We'll cast people who have more followers because we'll feel like that will, again, defray the challenge of both awareness as well as marketing by having an automatic outlet to people who are predisposed to going, which it kind of breaks your artistic soul that
I
the
know
best
it's killing
actor
me.
or actress for the job may not get that because of the other factors that are part of the consideration process. But it is every the data crunchers have done an excellent job at breaking everything down to a granular line item on a spreadsheet that feeds into the calculation for every decision. That can be great, and it alleviates the press, but it also gets rid of the sort of buccaneerism that I think Hollywood used to have.
They're killing me. For writers, we're saying, oh yeah, formulas and IP and stuff, remakes and rehashed ideas. That's work. So there goes all the creative souls out there. Then the actors, same thing. You have to have a social media following, which by the way means that you're somehow homogenous in some ways. So are you the most special person for the part? If you have a huge social media following, probably not. You're probably an influencer that's really pretty. So I don't know, man. It's making me want to cry.
Get
But
ready with me. Get ready with me.
and I do feel like I still have hope that the cream rises to the top and that great writers and great work. And like I said, I don't think your movie would have done this well had it not been good. Period. It would have
No,
made
you have to create something good because
right.
especially with social media, you can't hoodwink people into
Right.
going for Saturday. By 9 o'clock on Friday, the word is out if you made a piece of shit. Everybody knows it. And
Right.
that was a when you and I were coming up, like you could sort of manipulate the development game a little bit because the tracking groups weren't as pervasive as they were. You could play a game of telephone and someone could say, "Oh, I hear such and such is taking the
Right.
script to Paramount. You better get in on it." I mean, that was the only reason why Warren and JC were able to sort of stoke the coals of corporate anxiety and professional anxiety to get people to do things that they probably shouldn't have done if they just waited an hour and a half and got an actual connection with somebody to say, "Is it any good?" Doesn't matter.
I always talk about Hindenburg. Remember when I brought in Gator Farm and we bought it at Copelson, your two writers who are amazing. And I said, you guys got to bring me something like today because we're here, we want to buy, and they want to do a disaster movie. They want to do whatever. And they came up with this little treatment for Hindenburg and came in. And so I never laughed so hard because they had not thought about it. We were laughing behind the scenes. I'm like, they're going to throw their money at you. This is what because our studios wanted whatever other studio had. They wanted what was on trend. It was a wild time. But with all that money floating around, we had a $30 million a year deal at our studio.
Oh, exactly. It's
and a huge, just
crazy.
unlimited discretionary fund. So if you want to trick my boss into buying your little 2-page treatment that we put no thought into, then go for it. I was trying to get all my writer friends in. Remember, I brought my friend Bobby Singh, had that painter son into your office.
Oh yeah, I mean,
all my
it was
friends
amazing.
like, give me all of your stuff.
Yeah, and by the way, that's the thing that I think as studios have been acquired by larger and larger corporations that have much more fealty to Wall Street than they do to Wilshire.
Right.
What has happened is people are making decisions based on quarterly earnings reports and not what's good for a movie because a movie, as I mentioned earlier, takes 2 or 3 years from the point of actually agreeing, yeah, we're going to make it to getting it into theaters.
Right. So it doesn't matter what's trendy or I know.
Yeah.
But we used to
and most executives are not even employed. Like I had a conversation with the head of business affairs once about a deal with the actors saying, look, they'll do it for scale, but you have to give away the farm in the back end. He's like, I don't care. I probably won't even be here when this movie gets released. So knock yourself out. Let's keep the upfront costs down. Like
we do.
that mentality, I'm not even just in a sort of like negotiating money aspect. It just breeds this thing of fear, and you're not making decisions that are proper for what's good for the project. You're making a budget, not a movie.
Right. And we used to have in the 90s, it was a hybrid. We had the geniuses, we had the Stanford Panages, and we also had the business people who were running the studios. So you had both. So you had the geniuses kind of,
Sure.
and the business people coming together and saying, well, we want to win an Academy Award, but we also want to make, whatever, millions of dollars. And now I feel like that just has gotten so tiny where it's like, we can buy our Academy Award too, by the way, now.
There are only two people, I think, and I'm going to say two and a half because I don't really know her that well, but there are two people who still carry that torch. Donna Langley,
Yeah, of
who
course.
really
Legend.
has figured out, she cracked the code. And I would argue on a bit more of that Buccaneer set is Mike DeLuca still is able to pick winners and put huge bets.
Which I can't believe because I knew Mike DeLuca back in the day and he was off his rails, as you know.
He was dynamic, very much.
Yeah,
But
he,
now he doesn't have chairs in his office. He just sits on his balls because they're so big right now. They're so big.
he's given all that up and he's a normal person now, which has helped a lot, I'm sure. I mean,
Yes, it is.
back,
It is.
back, back in the hardcore partying days of.
Dude, there is a book. There was a podcast that Richard Rushfield did, and he interviewed the guys who sold Last Action Hero and talked about that spec sale and everything that happened. It's one of the most fascinating looks at that time period. You have to listen to it. And then
Chaotic.
he did another interview with, it was all about the 90s, another interview with Brenner and DeLuca about New Line in the 90s. So both of those things will just like so many flashbacks that you have because you knew everyone
Well,
there.
I'm writing a book, Craig.
Oh yeah.
I'm writing a book about the 90s that is loosely based on the truth. But it is very hardcore about and a lot of stuff that went on back then, which I think is just fascinating to people. Are you watching the studio? I think that's pretty
I am not because I don't want to,
you know, to
but because I just haven't had the time. I've been very
keep it up.
blessed with a lot going on in the last 6 weeks with the lead up to the movie and now aftermath, and we're putting together the writers' room for FT7 in a couple weeks because
You really are. You're getting right on. You have to, of course.
you have to. They want it for 2027,
Uh,
and look, I would love to be able to deliver that for them, but I also know, as I mentioned earlier, these movies are incredibly hard to pull off. And if it's
right,
not working, don't push it. Push it a year. It's fine. It'll be
right.
okay. I'd rather get it right
You want
than
the,
to damage the brand because we were trying to hit an arbitrary date that was put down by Wall Street for having a movie that they feel
but you also want to
confident
ride this momentum. You don't want people to forget about with that
in. But
buzz.
you know what? Yeah, but with that, yes, I want to ride the momentum.
Although you did American Pie and you saw that momentum never ended, so
Yeah, well, it really didn't. I mean, it
it
was.
did not ever end. People always love that movie. It is a cultural benchmark, and I feel like you have another one here in a different genre.
In a different genre. Look, we've tried to get another Pie movie in place, and we had a great idea, but there was a whole host of factors that I literally can't get into on this podcast. But what ultimately came of it is there's no way that we can get the original cast back together for a bunch of different reasons, and
Right.
um, that's a bummer because we have a great idea for what it is.
Oh,
Kramer really liked it. Like it was
never say never though.
I know for a fact it's
You
never.
and you can't tell us why, but I can guess. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I spend.
I know.
I'll tell you offline. It'll make your hair turn as white as mine.
Oh,
But
that's
yeah, I'll tell you,
heartbreaking.
it's uh it's one of those things where it sort of crystallizes that sometimes Hollywood will trip over themselves to save face than to basically guarantee money. It's
Right.
much more. I actually had a project where it was at Sony and they said they weren't going to do anything with it, and I actually packaged it with two actors and a director, and I went back and said, "Look, DreamWorks will make this movie right now if you put it in turnaround, or you can make it yourself." He said, "We just don't know how to market this thing. I've talked to the people. I love the script. I think this is a great package, but I'm not going to let you have it in turnaround because I'm not."
They held on to it.
They
Pretty
held
much.
on to it to kill it because they didn't want to explain to their bosses that they let it go and it was a hit somewhere else.
Wow, that is crazy. Well, I want to give a shout out because we have a mutual friend, Patrick, who wrote Escaping Death, who you invited to your premiere. You made this kid's life when he told me he was going to the premiere. But he wrote this behind the scenes Final Destination book that everybody should buy, Escaping Death. And is he not the nicest guy? He said he met you briefly at the premiere.
He did. I mean, I'd been speaking to him for years
Right.
and never met him. And when I did, I was like, hey, hey, and of course, big bear hug and all that stuff. No, he's a lovely, lovely guy. What I appreciate most about him is he comes at it from a fan's perspective, but with a journalist's integrity. So
Right. I
what
got
that means is he's not trying to write a book that is a tell-all. He's trying to write a book that says, how did this happen? And
right.
how are these things pulled off? So his approach was to make a book that fans could buy and really, really see what happens under the hood, and that newbies could buy and be very entertained at both the process, the people involved, and his writing style has a real sort of bounce to it, which I think also helps make it feel like you're a fly in the wall, but it's in a it's in a room filled with sugar, not shit, which is usually what happens in Hollywood. You're in a room full of shit, going, "Oh God, what do we do now? Oh my God." But he's lovely and terrific, and I was glad
I
that he's
tell
going to be
you,
in town to be
I
at.
learned a lot from that book of things that I'd forgotten about the franchise
There's
along the way.
things I didn't know.
I know
I mean, there's things I didn't know
I've
because,
seen
like,
all of them, but I was like, wow, okay, I forgot that. I definitely, I mean, it's so great to have it all in one place where you can just look at the Final Destination movies and also you learn so much about show business and making movies. I love that book. I'm not just saying
mhm.
that because he's my friend, but he really did a great job. And
He
that was
did a
nice.
great job. And the plan is, hopefully in about a year, re-release it with a new chapter on FT7. No, I'm sorry, on Final Destination Bloodlines, because he
For
did a
Bloodline.
bunch of interviews, and there's more to come.
Right.
Because I feel like this is a book that if we are grateful and fortunate that the sequels do business, that book can keep metastasizing. It'll be a nine, hopefully it'll be a 900 page dork,
Volume.
it'll be a two-parter. Uh,
Destinate until destination happens when
yeah,
you're
I mean,
like
it could go
95
on
years old.
forever. Although I will say this, I'm at the point now where if I'm lucky enough to get to 10, I am taking the off ramp. See ya, I'm out.
And really, you think?
Sure. Look, I, I'm 57 now. How much longer do I really want to be doing this? Like,
Oh, come
seriously.
on. How old was Bob Evans when he finally, like, come on, you can go forever. You've got another 30 years.
Yes, but here's the difference. Bob Evans didn't go on set. He wasn't there all day, every day,
Yeah,
doing everything.
it's a grind.
That's the version I like. I don't want to do a different version where I'm watching it come in and having not had a opportunity to weigh in, to persuade, and to
Right.
have
Just has your
impact
name on it.
creatively.
Right.
What's the
No,
point?
no.
I'd much rather go read a book. It's just silly.
Well, I'm excited for FT7 and I hope everyone goes and sees Bloodlines if you haven't already, because I guess all of you probably have. But Craig, thank you so much for giving me your time today. I can't tell you how much it means. I really look at these little podcasts as a way to catch up with old friends. So I've always admired you. I love your company. You guys gave me a voice when no one was listening.
Well, it was a voice that people needed to hear, and I can't wait to read your book because I want to be able to sort of put my memory glasses on and see who you're
Yeah.
really talking about when you're
You will
relating all the
know. You
anecdotes.
will absolutely know. I don't hide anybody. But it's also a lot of fiction in there too. I'm writing a good story that would make a great book, TV. I mean, Darren Star bought my ideal girl diary a long time ago to make it a TV show, and this is like just completely different. This is nostalgic now. This is the '90s. This is fat Hollywood, and it really got juicy because I figure that's what people want to read. So who cares? I just told it all, but I don't use any names. So you're Meg Mary. I don't at all, but you'll see. Okay,
I
Craig,
look
thank you
forward to
so
it.
much. And thank you so much for talking to me. And hopefully, where are you living in LA? No, you're not.
Well, the wife and kid and I live in Santa Monica.
Are you
And
really? I was just there. All right, next time you come, we're having a drink for sure. How many
done.
kids do you have?
Just one, just one. He's 17, and
That's
he's a
not even a
teenager.
kid. You have a grown. You have an American Pie sized child.
I know, and he was created by American Pie Activities. Who knew? So there you go.
All right. Well, next time I'm in town, I'll definitely hit you up for a drink. Okay. Bye.
Love it.
Thank you again so much for coming.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.